Idi Amin, a name that would become synonymous with tyranny and brutality, was born on May 17, 1925, in British Uganda. He was raised in a humble farming community in the West Nile province and belonged to the Kakwa ethnic group. His father's occupation as a farmer and herbalist fostered a deep connection to his Kakwa heritage, shaping his formative years. In the late 1940s, Amin embarked on a significant path by enlisting in the King's African Rifles, a British colonial regiment, marking the inception of his military journey. His commanding physical presence and evident combat aptitude propelled his rapid ascent through the ranks. By 1962, when Uganda gained independence from British colonial rule, Amin had achieved the esteemed rank of major within the regiment, reflecting his dedication and proficiency in the military sphere. Idi Amin's eventual rise to power stands as a pivotal moment in Ugandan history. In 1971, while President Milton Obote was abroad attending a Commonwealth summit, Amin seized the opportunity to orchestrate a military coup that would alter the course of the nation. With shrewd calculation, he capitalized on the absence of Obote, who had been accused of increasing authoritarianism and corruption. Amin's coup unfolded with a relatively limited display of violence, allowing him to swiftly assume control of Uganda's leadership. With charismatic authority, he declared himself the new president of the country, securing a firm grip on power. His sudden ascendancy was marked by a mix of intrigue and political maneuvering that solidified his status as a formidable force within Ugandan politics. Underpinning his rise was his stature within the Ugandan military, having risen through the ranks due to his perceived combat prowess and imposing presence. This reputation, combined with the prevailing discontent with Obote's regime, lent Amin an aura of legitimacy among certain factions. Idi Amin's rule and regime, spanning from 1971 to 1979, remains one of the most infamous and dark periods in Ugandan history. His leadership was characterized by a potent blend of authoritarianism, brutality, and erratic decision-making, resulting in significant suffering and upheaval for the Ugandan people. Once in power, Amin swiftly consolidated his authority. He surrounded himself with loyalists and purged the ranks of potential rivals, thereby securing his grip on the nation. Amin's regime was marked by a cult of personality, with his portrait adorning public spaces and his word treated as law. His tenure as the ruler of Uganda was marred by a litany of heinous acts that qualify as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Among the most egregious offenses were the mass executions that unfolded under Amin's orders. Thousands of Ugandans, spanning political dissidents, suspected opponents, and individuals from targeted ethnic and religious groups, met their untimely demise at the hands of his security forces. These killings, often devoid of due process, revealed a disregard for the sanctity of human life and a callousness that defied moral and legal boundaries. Torture and cruelty were also rife within Amin's regime. Detainees faced horrors that ranged from brutal beatings to electric shocks and psychological torment, leaving enduring scars on survivors and a brutalizing impact on society at large. Forced disappearances added another layer of horror, as individuals were snatched from their communities, their fates remaining shrouded in mystery, and their families grappling with the agony of uncertainty. Ethnic cleansing also emerged as a favored tool in Amin's arsenal. The infamous expulsion of Uganda's Asian population in 1972 thrust tens of thousands into forced displacement, stripping them of homes, possessions, and their very sense of belonging. Religious institutions, meant to provide solace, faced systematic attacks, with places of worship targeted and clergy members subjected to persecution and violence. Even soldiers from the Ugandan military fell victim to Amin's iron-fisted rule. Those deemed disloyal were subjected to extrajudicial executions, a brutal spectacle that served to intimidate and reinforce his stranglehold on power. Shockingly, even children were not spared, and reports surfaced of the recruitment and deployment of child soldiers, highlighting the regime's utter disregard for the innocence of youth. The harrowing episode at Entebbe Airport in 1976 bore witness to Amin's complicity in violence. By permitting the hijacking of an Air France plane and the subsequent Israeli rescue operation, he indirectly orchestrated the deaths of hostages, further cementing his legacy of bloodshed. Rape and sexual assault were also weaponized against women as tools of terror and subjugation, an affront to the dignity and autonomy of half the population. Destruction of property and infrastructure compounded the misery, as Amin's forces laid waste to homes, businesses, and vital community structures, leaving economic devastation in their wake. After finally being overthrown from power in 1979, Idi Amin's life took a dramatic turn. He fled Uganda and went into exile, eventually settling in Saudi Arabia, where he lived for the remainder of his life. While in exile, Amin's lifestyle was notably different from his time in power. He no longer held a position of authority, and he largely disappeared from the international spotlight. His lavish lifestyle and extravagance, which were characteristic of his rule, gave way to a more subdued existence. Amin's presence in Saudi Arabia was controversial, as many of his actions during his time as Uganda's leader had earned him international notoriety. Despite this, the Saudi government provided him with refuge and allowed him to live in the country. During his years in exile, Amin remained unrepentant for the atrocities committed during his rule. He continued to make occasional public statements, often with grandiose claims and inflammatory rhetoric, but he did not play any significant role in international politics or affairs. On August 16, 2003, Idi Amin passed away in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, due to multiple organ failure. His legacy remains a contentious and complex topic, with ongoing discussions about his rule, his impact on Uganda, and the lessons to be learned from his time in power. There can be no mistaking that his place in history, for most people, will remain that of a brutal despot, whose 8-year rule caused untold suffering to the Ugandan population.